You're listening to Answers from the Akashic Records, a world of empowerment service from Aingeal Rose and Ahonu.
Welcome. My name is Ahonu, and on behalf of Aingeal Rose, I want to welcome you to this special Akashic Record session on relationships. It will include abuse, codependency, divorce, intimacy, homosexuality, love, marriage, sex, twin flames, and soulmates. And some of the questions it will include today are Source's definition of relationships. How does Source define love? What's the difference between a twin flame and a soulmate? What are attractions really about? Is any form of jealousy necessary in relationships? What does marriage do to a relationship? What does Source say about reproduction? Where does sexual desire come from? Do we meet the same people over and over throughout our lifetimes? Do families come from the same soul group? What's the cause of abuse in relationships? And so on. So stay with us and we will cover some amazing things during this session today. Now, our seasoned participants will know from where these sessions originated, but for our newcomers, it is important to give you a little bit of background and an explanation as to what to expect. Firstly, you should know that Aingeal Rose is not in a trance, and neither is she channeling through any psychic entity, spiritual or angel or ascended master. She is downstepping this information directly from Source. Secondly, this session is being recorded, and even though you registered with your full name, we will not use people's personal names anywhere in the session. This simply ensures the privacy of all participants. All participants will receive a copy of the recording free of charge as soon as we have finished rendering it as a download. These will always be found in the private members area of your account at worldofempowerment.com. Thirdly, we will always try to answer all of the questions in the session, but in the event that we run out of time or we have too many questions in the lineup and we can't get to them, we will roll them over to the first free open forum session on the first Sunday of every month. And to be invited to that session, simply register online at worldofempowerment.com. You may not be aware of this, but many of the answers to these questions became the basis for Aingeal Rose's first book in the Honest to God series entitled A Time of Change, which is available from atimeofchange.info. Her second book, The Nature of Reality, is available on Amazon and various other bookstores, and that is available also from thenatureofreality.info. We also prepare the summaries, which we call profundities, and we post them online at worldofempowerment.com, allowing people from around the world to benefit from Source's words and guidance. And to date, we have collected thousands of hours of audio and transcripts from these sessions, and they are available in the archives at worldofempowerment.com. Finally, we ask you that once the session is over, please go to World of Empowerment and leave your comments about the session today and about your experiences. So that's the end of the formal introductions. I'd like now to welcome our own beloved Aingeal Rose.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience today as we were a little late getting started. All right, I'm going to go ahead and say the prayer. All right, so there's just a really beautiful white light when I said the prayer today on this topic, and no other color but that, just pure white.
So are we ready to go for our first question, Aingeal Rose?
Mm-hmm.
Our first question today is, what is Source's definition of relationships?
Okay, well, Source is basically saying that famous saying, whenever two or more are joined together or come together with a common purpose, that is what Source considers a relationship. So really it feels like the joining of at least two people. Not necessarily people, but the joining of two is what Source considers a relationship.
Now, that was one of the things, Aingeal Rose, that I wanted to ask very early on, because even in the graphic that I put up to represent this particular Akashic Record session, it shows two people. But is it possible to have that kind of relationship with yourself and extend that outwards and have a relationship with trees and a relationship with dogs and a relationship with the earth?
Well, a relationship is the joining of two things. So it can be a tree, it can be a dog. Okay, so considering things are energetic and everything has consciousness, you can have a relationship with a tree. You can have a relationship with an animal. Absolutely. Okay, but as far as the relationship with yourself, let me ask Source about that. Source is saying we're getting into technicalities here because every person has different aspects of themselves. So what you're really doing is you're becoming aware of other aspects of yourself. So in that way, it's a relationship. But you're already joined with those other parts. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. Okay, our next question. How does Source define love?
Is that really in there, Ahonu? Many times we've answered that. Is it?
Yes, it is, yes.
Okay, just a second. Source defines love as sharing. It's extending, giving, can also be receiving. But love is really an extension of oneself. Very simply put. It's a process of extending or giving.
Of oneself.
Yeah. Or of something. It doesn't have to be oneself. I mean, you could give somebody a pie and that would be an extension of love. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Anything you offer to another, anything you extend from yourself is love. It's a gift. A gift of giving is what I'm hearing today.
Okay. Our next question. What is the difference between a twin flame and a soulmate?
A twin flame is another part of you. In other words, you're the same being. So it's another part of you. Source seems to want to answer these questions very simply today for some reason. Okay, where a soulmate is anyone you would have had some sort of interaction with throughout other lifetimes. There seems to be a joining with soulmates in the sense like there is some type of relationship with them. And those relationships can be on multiple levels. They can also be positive or negative. Where a twin is literally a part of you. You get the difference?
I do, yeah. When you say relationships can be either positive or negative, do we actively choose whether they're positive or negative? Or do they come into our lives somehow for us to work through them?
Well, where the choice comes in is if you were agreeing to enter into a relationship that is positive or negative. So it's your choice if you enter into a negative relationship. If you stay there or you interact with it, then it's a choice you make, you see. The Source is being really clear about that, to say that you can have negative things come into your life, but if you choose to interact with them and stay with them, then that's your choice.
Okay, our next question. What are attractions really about?
All attractions are based on a perceived need. Okay, so when you're attracted, when that chemistry happens and you're attracted, it's because you perceive that that other person has something that you don't have that you would like to have. Or they catalyze you in some way. Okay, but it still all comes down to the belief that you don't have what you need to catalyze yourself. So attractions can be on a lot of levels, as we know, right? They can be spiritual, they can be emotional, they can be codependent, they can be sexual. Okay, there's lots of levels of attraction. But it is worthwhile to ask yourself what it's based on. Part of the problem with attractions is that a lot of times they don't last forever. There'll be an initial pull, let's just say, but it may not always last the person's whole entire life. Okay, but all attractions are based on a perceived need.
Our next question, Aingeal Rose.
Wait 1 second. Source does want to distinguish between attractions and love. Okay, because attractions are based on a perceived need. Love is not. Love is something that is just a desire to give or extend or share. People make the mistake of thinking that attractions are love, when actually underneath attractions are a perceived need.
But does that mean that love can embrace attractions?
You see, okay, it's really making a distinction between attractions and love. Because it's saying that you could be attracted to somebody which may get you into a relationship, let's say, right?
Okay.
But where the love comes in is what you do when you're in the relationship. In other words, love is something that is practiced. It's something that you do, you extend from yourself. Okay? Mm-hmm. Do you understand the difference?
I do.
Okay.
But does it mean that when you're in love then, and you're in a loving relationship, that you're no longer attracted to that person or that thing?
No, it doesn't mean that necessarily. But let's just say this. It's very different. See, because Source is defining love as extension, mm-hmm. It's also saying that attractions are based on perceived lack, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. They're very different because when you interact in a relationship based on a attraction, all right, you want something from the other person, okay? You want something from them. You feel that if you're interacting with them, you're having your needs fulfilled, be on any level, okay? And that if those needs are not fulfilled in the same way anymore, then all of a sudden you say that you're quote unquote out of love. Do you understand?
Right.
So if somebody stops extending to you or doing something for you, something you feel you need, all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is over, okay?
Right.
Where love is very different. Love does not want anything. Okay, love extends.
Gotcha.
Love just is. Do you understand?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Our next question. Is any form of jealousy necessary in a relationship?
Well, let's ask Source about jealousy in general first. How would Source define jealousy, okay? Jealousy is the fear or the belief that you're going to lose what you perceive as love. Okay? So if you feel that somebody represents love to you and they go off and do something with another person, you perceive you have lost that love. Okay, so that's what it's based on. Is it ever necessary in a relationship? No, but there needs to be a lot of trust. In other words, it's not really love, in other words, okay? Jealousy would go under the heading of one of those perceived lacks, like we're talking about today. It's a perception that you will lose love or lose the object of your attraction. So it's not necessary to be jealous, because that was a question you asked, right? Is it necessary?
Well, is any form of jealousy necessary?
It's not necessary. You know, it does happen, but that would indicate that there's other issues with the people, okay?
Right. So no form of jealousy.
It's not necessary. It's all based on a fear of losing love, so that's what has to be looked at, you see?
Right. Okay. Our next question. What does marriage do to a relationship?
Well, Source is saying it's more about what does the relationship do with the marriage? Okay. Okay, because marriages are an agreement. They're an agreement to love one another. They're an agreement to extend love. Okay, and within that, you know, marriages are wonderful arenas for practicing love. And they work as long as both people are committed to that. But if they're not, if one person just wants something from the relationship, if one person is in the I need place, then a lot of times problems will arise sooner or later if those needs are not being met. They can be big needs or simple needs. They can be... One of the problems with marriages is that when people get married, suddenly the roles change. In other words, people usually have some sort of an idea of what a marriage should look like or be like. Subconsciously, we assign roles to each other to play. And if one or the other doesn't play those roles, then all of a sudden we're unhappily married. When the truth is roles or belief systems, they need to go out the window because it's not really allowing for a person to be who they are. It's worthwhile to look at our perceptions of marriage. We hear it all the time, Ahonu, when people ask about relationships. They have a big list of the descriptions of the perfect person. We've all heard that, right? This is the perfect person. This is what they look like. This is how much money they make. This is, the way they are with me. All of these things are preconceived programming. Because you could have a list of the perfect person, but that person might not be perfect for you at all. But how would you know? Because you're letting your ideas of what's attractive or what's a perfect relationship come into the picture. The Source would not put that under the camp of love either, because love is extension.
Our next question. What does Source say about reproduction?
It's laughing at this question, interestingly. Okay, hang on. So I'm assuming we mean the process of creating a child. Is that right? Or just the sex act itself? What do we mean?
Well, I imagine this participant is looking for an answer around the sex act supposedly being an act of love. Or as you say, an act of giving, but a lot of times it might be an act of receiving, perhaps. But its use in terms of the reproductive act.
The sexual act. There's levels to the sexual act. In fact, there's levels to sex through the whole entire chakra system. So it's not just sex in the lower organs, but I'm going to assume we're talking about that at the moment. What Source says is there's that use of it, to produce a child, sexual act. It's really about joining. Sex is about joining, joining of energies. It can be a wonderful extension of love if both people are using it for that reason. So again, we're coming back down to what's the use. If somebody's using sex, to take energy from another person, then that's in the lack camp. But if somebody's using sex as a way to express love to somebody, that's extension. At the lower chakra level, it is the vehicle we use to reproduce. However, now we're going to get into inner alchemy or inner love for a minute, because Source is saying that you can really have an orgasm at every level of the chakra system, and you can have it with another person. But it does require that both people are growing in that direction. In other words, they need to have some level of awareness about what they're doing. Again, it really comes down to use. And what Source is saying is it's unfortunate that the sexual act for the majority of people is just used for personal pleasure. Which isn't necessarily an extension of love. This brings in the bigger picture of lack itself, and I suppose we should talk about this because it's a major problem, I hear Source saying, is that we do perceive ourselves lacking. We perceive ourselves with needs. We definitely don't have an awareness that we can be filled with the love of God and all our needs are met. We're just loved and taken care of. I mean, you know, most of us do everything in life because of a perceived need. I mean, you go out to work because you perceive you need money to pay your bills. You eat because you perceive you need food, or you'll die. So we live in a consciousness that believes we're lacking. And many of us use relationships and sex for those reasons. See, to truly love another person in a relationship, it requires that you want nothing from them. In other words, they don't have to do certain things for you. You love them just because they are. You want the best for them. You nourish and support them in their beingness. And if both partners are doing it for one another, you know, this is when you see a lot of growth happen. So there's a big difference.
Okay, our next question, Aingeal Rose. Where does sexual desire come from?
Is that one of your questions, Ahonu?
No, Aingeal Rose, it's not one of my questions.
Okay, just a second. But you want to know the answer.
I'm equally intrigued by the possible answer. Yes.
Okay. Okay, well, it's a biological activity. Okay, the human body is set up hormonally and chemically to activate, you know, certain parts of itself at particular times and with growth. It's part of the growth of the human being, okay, to have sexual chemistry happen, to have hormones happen at particular maturations. This is really where a lot of it comes from, Ahonu. It really is the desire of the species to reproduce itself. So it's inbuilt in the anatomy. Is that good enough for you, or do you want to ask more about that?
No, I'm very happy with that,
Okay.
Aingeal Rose.
And again, we're talking about the basic level. We're not talking about what people do when it becomes an addiction, for example.
Sure.
Okay?
Yes.
That it is a drive that's inherent in the quote-unquote animal nature of us to keep our species going.
Can you give me that again so I can get the wording correctly?
I said it is a desire within our biology to keep the species going on the animal level, okay, of our anatomy. It's the reason why kids, once they become adolescents, suddenly they start thinking about sex, you know, because their bodies start producing hormones to get them ready to reproduce the species if they so choose, okay? So that is where a lot of it comes from. And again, unfortunately, it has been misused. It has been taken and glorified, let's just say. And the truth is that, yes, it's pleasure, and I think Source is giving the... Life has an aspect of pleasure to it. It's inbuilt in us as well. It feels good. Okay, however, it depends how it's used, which is really the thing that determines whether something's loving or unloving.
Okay, our next question. Do we meet the same people over and over again in our lifetimes?
Yes, and you meet new ones as well. You don't meet everyone you've known before in a lifetime. It's only people, you only meet the people that you have part of your contract with or that come around. You know, sometimes you'll have soulmates come around in your life at different times to catalyze growth. Okay, that's one reason they do that. They may not stay, but they may come to serve a purpose and then they're out of your life. Okay, so other people you meet because they're a continuation of another life for continuing a relationship or continuing learning. So there's lots of reasons why you meet people that you've known before, but you don't meet everybody.
Our next question. Do you keep the same family from lifetime to lifetime?
Not every lifetime. It's really kind of similar to the previous answer. You can come in as a soul family that you've been with before, okay? And that would have to do with what you're all doing together as a group. setting a stage. But keep in mind that we have lots of different families in different lifetimes, so you don't always meet the same people.
Okay, our next question. Do families come from the same soul group?
It's the same question.
Well, no, it's different. What this question is asking is about the same soul group, like whether that be Palladian or Arcturian or whatever, or could some people in your family be from different soul
They can be
planetary origins?
They can be, yes.
Families.
They can be from different planetary origins. See, we have to keep in mind the spirit essence of ourselves and what we're doing as a spirit and what we're here to do. That would depend on who you end up with as a group. Okay, you may be aware of yourself as a Pleiadian, for example, and know that other people in your family are Andromedan or Reptilian, for example. But you may all have come together with your own unique qualities for specific reasons. Okay, so
right.
You're not always from the same soul group.
Right.
A lot of your soul group are out doing other things. We've also met people in our lives who we know are part of our soul group. They're not in our families, but we know them. We remember them as part of our original galactic family. And they could be off doing other things. You might have one member of your family who's part of your soul group, or two, and the rest might not be. Okay?
Okay. What is the cause of abuse in relationships?
Okay, well, the first answer source is giving us is the ego run amok. And really, it all does come down to that both parties don't love themselves. They're definitely not extending love in the situation. And we're talking about the whole reward and punishment belief system. Both people are enmeshed in it. As long as the victim and victimizer stay together, they're both contributing to the process. Both are really coming from definitely a perceived lack of love. But again, there's other things involved in this. When it says the ego run amok, it really does mean that perceptions of domination and control, or perception of, either sex, the belief systems around that, what they deserve, the belief in guilt and punishment, the self-punishment, all of that, okay, is involved in abuse. There really isn't any difference between the victim and the victimizer. They're both, as long as they stay in that relationship with one another, they're both part of the same problem.
Our next question. What is really going on with enemies? And I think this question is drawing a distinction between, say, abusive partners who may be considered enemies on one level. But I think this might be extending it outward into, say, families who may be enemies with each other, or countries that might be enemies with each other. What's really going on there in terms of the bigger picture of the relationships?
Source wants to go back a minute just to the previous question about abuse. Okay? Right out of my head now. I wanted to say something about karma. That's what it was. Okay. That, you could look into somebody's past lives who's in an abusive relationship, and you might see some past life event or something occurring between the two people, right? That somebody could say the victimizer is now in a karmic relationship with the victim. But we have to remember that this is not Source's plan. Source's plan is forgiveness, which means that any belief system other than love and extension and giving needs to be forgiven by both parties. And that's the only thing that erases karma, is forgiveness. Karma is just a law of attraction, really, a law of cause and effect, but it's not Source's love, and that really needs to be understood. Okay, now having said that, I can go to the enemy camp, okay? So the enemies, too, it's all perception. It's the perception that somebody else has done something to you that you have to pay them back for, or that they have something you want. Okay, so it's still, we're just going to put that all in the ego camp. All enemies are perceptions of an outside person who has something that you want or you feel you're judging in some way. So they're all based on, perceptions that are just illusory. Unfortunately, it causes so much damage, but it really is a distorted perception. See, it all comes down to this victim-victimizer belief system that we're all in. And as long as we're in it, we're never going to know harmony or peace, because that game uses excuses to make somebody guilty. Okay, it's the belief in God's punishment. It's the belief in other people deserving bad things. And, whenever you come from those places, as long as you believe that on any level, you're going to get the same experience. And they go together. You want to talk about relationship energy. Whatever you perceive is what you experience. Sometime, somewhere.
Okay. How does Source define codependency?
Codependency is, once again, the belief in need and lack. It's the idea that only that other person can fulfill your needs, can make you happy, can, enrich your life. Codependency is when you believe you don't have it within your own capability, to succeed or to be loved or whatever it is, But codependency is a reliance on another person to provide for you or fill your needs. Okay?
Okay. Here's a good question now.
Hi, I'm Aingeal Rose of Grady, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about the work that I've done for the past 20 years, being a reader of the Akashic Records, predominantly. I've evolved to this work through many years of meditation and being taken to other worlds, and found that we all have a library in spirit that contains our soul's journey through all of our lifetimes on this planet and others. Through my work, I enjoy helping other people find their soul purpose, look at their spirit, help them through their challenges, understand their relationships, and guide them to fulfill their highest soul purpose. I've written 2 books on this subject. One's called A Time of Change, and those were predominantly group sessions that we did when people had bigger spiritual questions for the problems in their lives, such as what about the financial collapse? What about 2012? What about healing? What happens when people commit suicide? Things like this that became the basis for group sessions that began in 2009 and continue to this day. The first book, A Time of Change, deals with questions that happened before 2012, and some leading into what would happen after. And the second book, The Nature of Reality, deals with questions people asked about consciousness, what is God, what's the origin of creation, what about time and dimensions, what about dreams, why do we dream, and love and miracles and topics such as that. I'm also a personal Akashic Record consultant, and I'm also a business consultant through the Akashic Records. I feel these ways of going into the records and helping people in their personal lives and in their business adds an extra sacred dimension to their life here. If you're interested in seeing more about my work, you can go to aingealrose.com or worldofempowerment.com. Thank you.
Okay. Here's a good question now, Aingeal Rose. Is intimacy necessary in a relationship?
For us, it definitely is. I don't know about anybody else.
Okay.
Okay, now can you define intimacy? Because there's levels of intimacy. There's physical intimacy, emotional intimacy, intellectual intimacy. So which level are we talking?
Now, I can't speak for this participant, but I would imagine it's sexual intimacy.
Touching, feeling, all that.
Yes,
Okay.
I imagine, yeah.
Okay. So, the key word here is necessary, right? And I'm going to address this on different levels, because we're talking about different levels today, really, in this conversation. At the level of somebody who doesn't love themselves truly, which is probably the majority of the population, at the level of somebody who still believes in needs, human interaction, the intermingling of one another's energy fields, the feeling of being touched, can be a type of nourishment. Okay, it can be a type of food, let's just say. For example, we hear stories of children. I remember long ago there was a child abuse story where the father or the mother, one of them, would lock the child in a closet for just about the whole entire day, right? And when the child was finally discovered, if they found that this child was about half the size of a normal child its age. So it could be a lot of reasons for that. It could be the lack of sunlight in the dark place, could be, but that makes the point as well, right? That we rely on certain things in our environment to nourish us, okay? So intimacy at those levels, at the normal human level, where we're still just normal people, okay, would be necessary in a relationship to keep each other healthy, okay? Now, at the level of an enlightened person or somebody who has moved into, the love that we've been talking about, where you really totally know that you have no needs, it's not necessary. There's plenty of people who live alone and never have intimacy, and they thrive pretty well. And some people prefer it, actually, okay? But that's coming to a level of awareness, okay? So we're kind of mixing levels here, and I hope people understand that we are doing that, okay?
Okay. Our next question, Aingeal Rose.
I just want to, sources keep still talking about this.
Okay.
Okay, now it wants to, again, bring in the element of sharing. We define love as extension, okay? So intimacy with a person can be a way of extending love. And when you're just loving somebody completely. Do you understand?
I do.
Okay.
Okay. Our next question. Do relationships grow over time?
Well, once again, it depends on what you do with them. Okay, whether they grow or they don't grow. I mean, love is a practice at this level of our lives. This level of human awareness and all of the programs we've got going on and all of the distractions and all of that, okay? Love is a constant, it's a choice in relationships, okay? Because many things will come up in a relationship where you'll be put in a situation of choosing. What's it going to be? Is it going to be the ego belief system, or is it going to be love? And oftentimes you'll have to choose that. Okay, but relationships will grow. If both people, and this is the key word, if both people are using the relationship to extend love.
Okay. What keeps a relationship together?
Well, a lot of things can. Again, it kind of depends on the level that the people are functioning at. Okay, because we could say people stay together for convenience. People stay together for the house, for money, for the kids. There's lots of reasons people stay together in relationships. But to keep a relationship together where the two people involved Okay? Stay committed to each other, if that's what you're talking about. That has a lot to do with the love I'm talking about. And there's definitely, love doesn't betray. Okay? Let's put it that way. Love is loyal. Love is committed. Love is aware of its decisions and their effects on the other person. Okay, so all of those things keep a relationship together. The agreement between the two people about the relationship keeps it together. You know, if one person changes their mind and they're not in the agreement anymore, then chances are that relationship's not going to last. See, Source, according to the Course in Miracles, Source would call that committed relationship that I just spoke of a holy relationship. It's a relationship where both people are using the relationship to love themselves, to love one another, to basically practice love and become better and better at it, okay? Where an unholy relationship is one that's based on the ego's belief system of, you need to do this for me, and as long as you do this for me, I'm going to be happy, and if you don't, then I'm going to go look for somebody else. Now, that's what Source considers an unholy relationship. And going back to the original question, when you asked about how does Source define a relationship, it said it was a joining of two things. So that joining is a choice. Okay, so if one person decides it's not going to join anymore, then there's no relationship. The relationship has gone. Now, at a cosmic level, you could say we're all in a relationship with each other, but that's not the level that we're addressing today. Okay?
Okay. Next question. Are relationships predestined?
All right, some are. Some are agreements between different parties to meet at a particular time, in a particular system, in a particular era, for particular reasons. So some are predestined. They're agreed upon before entering. But you could have a relationship that's predestined, and it doesn't mean that once the meeting takes place here, that the people involved will keep the relationship or continue with it. That's where the choice comes in and the reason why they've come together. There's lots of reasons why there are predestined relationships. Some are continuations from past lifetimes where perhaps they didn't get to complete, or perhaps they were siblings in a relationship and were attracted to each other, and now they come back as lovers so they can have a different type of relationship. There's some relationships that are predestined between parents and children. Some are, like we know nowadays, many twins are coming together for going home together and planetary healing and things like that. So yes, they can be predestined.
How do you know a particular relationship is good for you?
It's a good question. I could say all of the typical answers, but Source isn't giving me those typical answers. The typical answers would be, well, you'd be happy all the time and, everything in your life would succeed. But it's not really saying that. It's saying relationships that make you more loving are relationships that are good for you, because it's unrealistic that you would go through life without any challenges. And a good relationship is one that when those challenges occur, that you support one another in finding the highest solution to the challenges, that you're both willing to give to each other to get through things, that you're looking for the highest win possible together. Okay, that you're not, you look at your fears when fears come up. You take responsibility for your own issues when they surface instead of projecting them onto the other person. So you do need a partner who is encouraging, who is supportive. You definitely don't want a relationship where you're being put down or abused in some way, those would not be considered relationships that are good for you because they don't promote growth. They're very stifling. So a good relationship is two people who work together and each take responsibility for their own issues when they come up, but they're mutually supportive and they're genuinely interested in each other being loved to the highest extent, and they support that other person loving themselves to the highest extent. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Good. Is trust or honesty necessary in a relationship?
Well, we already mentioned that earlier. Source did say loyalty and trust are vital to a relationship and honesty. Now, that doesn't mean you have to tell the other person every little tiny thought you have, okay? But in terms of the whole, we have to think of the whole. We have to think of people who enter into relationships for the good of the whole, okay? So you always have to take a look at that when you're in a relationship. So honesty is vitally important because how can you truly know one another, truly know how to help one another, or extend love to one another when one person is keeping things in and for whatever fear they may have about it, okay? And because that just breeds resentment sooner or later, and that never works either. So it is vitally important. Trust is vitally important because if one person wants to change their mind about their commitment, they should have the courage to say that to the other person so that the other person can be free as well. You see, in a way, you always have to allow for choice, okay? Because if there's dishonesty or betrayal, then the other person has no clue. And if they have no clue, they can't respond. They can't choose. They can't, it's not fair, really. Okay, so it is very, very important.
Our next question, Aingeal Rose, you've already answered it when you spoke about the difference between a holy relationship and a special one. So we'll move on to the next question. Is homosexuality natural?
That's a loaded question, Ahonu. Interesting answer. Source is saying, well, it isn't unnatural. Okay, and I'll explain. There's a lot that goes into homosexuality, really, in terms of what it can do. Those relationships could be very powerful, could be examples of two people practicing love and loving themselves. So there are a lot of facets to homosexuality, just like there are with any relationships. There are karmic issues, there are soul growth issues, there's genetic issues involved. I mean, there's a whole plethora of things. So when you use the word natural, I'm assuming that maybe they mean sexually, perhaps. Do you think so?
Yes, or the old school view that it must mean you have something wrong physically.
No, but I do say there have been, as we know and we've talked about before in many sessions, there's been a lot of genetic manipulation that has gone on way back when experimentations were happening. So we're not all perfect. None of us are perfect. Okay, so how somebody ends up could have a lot of genetic and biological factors to it, but there's a soul thing going on here too. Okay, so our thing is, it just is what it is. Source has no judgment around it. And once again, it comes down to the same thing. What are you using the relationship for? And there is something to be said about sexual debauchery. It would not be the right use of sex. Okay, so not that sex is only for reproduction, because it's not. It's only reproduction on the lower animal nature. But whether a sex act is an extension of love or just a desire for pleasure, where you're taking, is two different things. And all relationships can be holy or unholy.
Okay. Our next question. Is there a difference between cross-gender and cross-cultural relationships? And perhaps I should explain this because I have a feeling that the person who's asking this question is concerned about relationships between, say, a Chinese man and a South African woman, or a Vietnamese woman and a British man, or that kind of cross-cultural relationship, and perhaps cross-gender too.
The question is
there a difference between any of those kinds of relationships? Like, can those cross-cultural relationships be the same as two Japanese people from their own native country, culture, language?
Well, you won't end up with the same genetics, that's for sure. Okay, if you do breed with that person, a cross-cultural person, you're not going to have quote-unquote pure genetics of that race. Okay, so I don't feel that there's necessarily a judgment about that, but it is a fact, okay, that the gene pool gets a bit diluted in terms of a particular culture. Okay, so let me ask Source more about this. I know I'm being very repetitive, but Source is being very repetitive in saying, we have to stay out of judgment about all of this, because it really does come down to motive and purpose. And that will answer all those questions, because you could have two soulmates, for example, or even two twin flames. One is Chinese, the other is American, okay? And maybe each one of them, as an individual soul doing their soul growth as a person, needs to be in that other culture for a particular lifetime for whatever reason, whatever soul growth, right? And then they have a predestination to meet at a particular moment in that same lifetime. And they come together and they continue their relationship. All of that is appropriate. It's all appropriate, okay? So there's different ways of looking at this. On one level, all of the mix of the gene pool, if they have kids, could be an interesting mix of genes, right? For particular talents to emerge. You never know. Other times, mixes don't produce such great results. But again, Source doesn't have any judgment about it. It's basically, what are the souls up to that are going through these things, and how are they using the relationship?
Our next question, Aingeal Rose, I think you may already have answered it. Do healthy relationships project onto each other?
They can.
They can?
They can, because it's, like Source is saying, it's learning. The difference is in what do they do when that happens. Okay, so let's say there's a really great, healthy relationship, and something occurs and they get in a little bit of an argument, and they may say something to the other person that's a projection. Okay, a healthy relationship would take a break from that and sit back and take a look at why they just projected onto that person, and take a look at, was the projection even anything factual, or was it their own issue? Where an unhealthy relationship would never do that. Somebody in an unhealthy would never take responsibility for taking a look at what they just said. They'd never apologize. They would just continue to blame the other person. Where somebody in a healthy one would sit back and want it all forgiven as soon as possible. Okay, understanding that, blame is never really appropriate. Okay? That's the difference.
Okay, our next question. In general, are relationships improving over time? And again, I'm going to have to make assumptions here, perhaps, to explain where this question is coming from. I mean, were relationships the same in the year 0 as they are in the year 2000?
Well, definitely not.
Definitely not.
No. So relationships would be evolving. A good example, you could answer that also yourself when you're making the comment of how many men you're noticing coming to spiritual groups and, going away from all the old rules of what a man should be in, where women are also coming away from their roles. So you've seen that change over in the last years, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you always meet your loved ones after death?
90% of the time, you're going to meet family. They may be there to greet you, but it doesn't mean you'll stay with family. Some spirits stay with family after many years. Other people don't. They depends, again, on what you're doing and where you got to go and what you have to learn and if you need healing. But initially, most likely, you'll meet somebody who you recognize.
Okay, our next question. What happens energetically when you have several relationships?
Like, what do you mean?
Gosh, I don't know, Aingeal Rose. I imagine, again, that somebody may be in several relationships.
You mean intimate relationships? Sexual
That's
relationships?
what it looks like. What happens energetically when you have several relationships? Yeah, I imagine it might be if you have several sexual partners going on at the same time. What's happening energetically? Because I'm sure it doesn't relate to business relationships, because somebody might have countless business relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll answer it on the sexual level then.
Yes.
Shall we?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, well, you all do absorb each other energetically. Whatever you're carrying in your aura, once you come together, you both, or whoever's there, they do all absorb some of the other.
But is that a good thing or a bad thing? Or is there judgment
Well, it all
around it?
depends on the relationship, okay? Like I say. I mean, if you're in an open relationship and everybody agrees that you're going to have multiple partners and they know this, they know that they're all taking on pieces of each other and they're perfectly fine with it, then let them have at it. You know what I mean? Okay, but if it's a betrayal situation where one person's saying he's committed to one person and then he goes off and has relationships with other people behind the other person's back, that's definitely not appropriate, because when they come home to their original partner and they have relations with them, they're giving that other person the energy of who they were just with, and that's not cool if the person doesn't know about it.
Right.
Not
So
to
it's-
mention diseases you could carry.
So
back and forth.
it's a choice, though, is what you're saying. That there's-
whether it's a good thing or not a good thing depends on the situation. Okay?
Okay. Our next question. How does crying alleviate pain in dysfunctional relationships?
Well, crying is always a release of toxins. It is a way of clearing the body. So that's what all Source wants to say about it. It does clear toxins, which promotes healing. That's why after somebody has a really good cry, and they may cry, if they're in a bad situation, they may cry a lot, or they may cry in grief after something. It's always a good idea for that to happen, because eventually the person will come to the place where suddenly they find that they feel better. And that's the reason, because they've got it out of their body, they've purged themselves, and now some new energy can come in.
All right, our final question today, Aingeal Rose. What does Source have to say about divorce? Divorce.
Are you going to sing it, Anne?
I'm not going to sing
That
it.
country song? All right. Well, Source is saying whenever any relationship ends, it's unfortunate. Only because it just means that one or the other wasn't willing to love. So it's not bad. There's always another opportunity for love, as we see. This is the way life works, is it's always going to give you another opportunity to choose again, to choose to love again, to learn to love. But Source is just saying, giving that answer, not from a religious perspective or anything like that, or not from the fact that people change their minds, but just from the unfortunate reality that people don't clear their programs. People don't take responsibility for their own issues. Okay, they don't appreciate the reflections that another person can give them. Okay, so for all those reasons, it's unfortunate, what Source is saying. However, you'll always have another opportunity to be given love or to learn about love You're not ever left bereft like that. Okay, so there are situations, like in the case of abuse that you spoke of earlier, where it's a good thing to get divorced if you're in that sort of situation. But again, it's the same thing, really, that you've got one or both people not willing to heal or to move past their problems. It's the same idea, really, okay?
Okay. Well, that does bring us to the end of our session today. And we, as usual, will go through a quick summary of what we've covered. My name is Ahonu, and on behalf of Aingeal Rose, I am happy to present to you the summary from the never-before-heard answers from the Akashic Records about relationships, which included abuse, codependency, divorce, intimacy, homosexuality, love, marriage, sex, soulmates, twin flames, and more. Source defines a relationship as two or more people joining together. Considering all things are conscious, you can have a relationship with all life everywhere. Source defines love as giving, receiving, extending, and offering oneself. A twin flame is another part of you, the same being, whereas a soulmate is someone you had a previous relationship with in the past. Relationships can be either positive or negative. Both are choices. All attractions are based on a perceived need. Attractions are different to love. Love does not require needs to be fulfilled. Jealousy comes from the fear that you will lose love. Freedom from jealousy requires trust. No form of jealousy is necessary in any relationship. A marriage is an agreement to extend love and is a wonderful testing ground for love. Many people unconsciously assign roles to a partner in a relationship, but this does not allow a person to be who they really are. The sexual act has many levels, many of which do not relate to love. Sex is about joining, embracing, and creating life, and can be a wonderful expression of love. Sexual reproduction concerns itself with the base chakra. It is possible to experience orgasm through all the chakras. Sexual pleasure is not necessarily an extension of love. We live in a lack consciousness in which we use relationships and sex to fulfill our needs. Nourishing and supporting a partner in their being promotes personal growth for all concerned. Sexual desire is a biological activity to promote human survival. Sexual desire is a natural part of our biology that ensures the continuation of the species. Sexual desire has been glorified and misused in our society. We can meet many of the same people over several lifetimes. Families can be from different planetary origins. The ego run amok is the cause of abuse in relationships. An abusive partner is not extending love. Both partners in an abusive relationship are contributing to the lack of extending love. Victim-victimizer relationships can have their roots in past lives. Everything needs to be forgiven. Karma is not Source's love. Enemies perceive that another is different and has judgment and illusory perceptions between them. As long as we believe in enemies, there can be no harmony in this world. Codependency is the idea that only that one partner can fulfill your needs. Sexual intimacy is not necessary for a loving relationship. At the level of the illusion of needs, intimacy can be a form of nourishment. Intimacy can be used to keep a relationship healthy, but it is not a necessity. Intimacy can be an extension of love. Love is a practice and can grow over time. Many factors keep a relationship in play, but commitment is one of the biggest. An unholy relationship is based on needs, but a holy relationship is based on the extension of love. Some relationships are predestined and are agreed upon before birth, but countless choices can determine if they continue or not. Relationships that make you more loving are relationships that are good for you. Homosexuality is not unnatural and can be perfect for you on a soul level. Genetic, soul, and biological factors do not affect Source's love. Cross-cultural relationships can dilute the gene pool, but do not take from the potential to grow in love. Some relationships project onto each other, but when looked on with love, can lead to much soul growth. Relationships evolve over time. It is common to meet your relatives after death, before you continue on your soul journey. Sexual partners absorb each other's energy. Crying releases toxins and helps the healing process. Divorce can mean one or the other was not willing to love completely, but life always gives another opportunity to love. So that brings us to the end of our session today. I'm going to ask Aingeal Rose to come back now and to close the records.
All right, thank you everyone for your wonderful questions today. If there are any more on this topic you need to address, please feel free to email us.
Remember to enter your comments on worldofempowerment.com. We appreciate you all being here and for participating. We love you so much. Until next week, blessings from myself, Ahonu, and from Aingeal Rose.
You've been listening to Answers from the Akashic Records, a world of empowerment service from Aingeal Rose and Ahonu. To get the profound statements from the Akashic Records in your mailbox each week, log on to worldofempowerment.com.